Good morning, David.
More or less, how you doing?
Outstanding. I see we're very feeling kind of bluish
Yep.
today.
Yeah, we're not quite color coordinated enough. We gotta start texting each other on our dress codes here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So welcome to Dynamic Healing Moments, and we're gonna switch gears. We spent a week or so talking about sleep, and we will come back to that since it's so critical. But we're gonna start going into what's called attachment, is where you attach different things. And Dr. Arya, I'm going to start with that little formula, which I think is worth talking about today, because what we're going to talk about today is death, processing loss. And the background of this is my father passed away over 4th of July weekend. My ex-wife passed away about 6 weeks earlier of Alzheimer's disease at a very young age. One of my son's neighbors died this weekend on a skateboard on only 45 years old. A fast fall, head trauma done. So, that's not even all the losses this last couple of weeks. So we all have losses. For some reason, for me, there's sort of a collection of them or a conglomeration right now. So I get to face this more than I usually do. And my father's services are this Friday. And so, Leslie, you had a little formula which I think is really critical. And we also make one major point today. But anyway,
Yeah.
what was your formula?
Yeah. I think, and also just to highlight before I share the formula, is that loss is not just about someone. It can be a dream. It can be a relationship. It can be actually maybe functionality. Sometimes we feel like, we're not able to do something like we used to. And this is where we are in the present moment. When we before we came online, David and I were talking about what is really suffering and loss, and this comes from Shenzhen Yang, a Zen Buddhist and meditation teacher, which really makes sense. The formula is pain multiplied by resistance equals suffering. P times R equals suffering. So the more you resist the reality of your life, so pain is basically, life is sometimes very difficult and also joyful, but we're talking about losses today. So when pain and life is basically pain. And when we have physical pain itself, that's pain. Some things are unavoidable. And when we resist it or when we fight with it, we do the push stuff. We try to push the bad feelings and try to feel good feelings. When we do this push and pull back and forth, that amplifies what already is existing. If we're experiencing grief, any kind of loss, it could be with a pet, it could be with a mom, a dad, a child, it could be anything, a job, finances, housing. When you lose something, that's pain. What we tend to do as human beings, we add our mental scripts. And when we add our mental scripts, we're actually saying, I'm resisting my reality. And that amplifies suffering. So,
Right. Well, I'm just thinking out loud here is it's interesting when you think about this because life is actually a series of losses, right? I mean,
yeah,
obviously you want love and joy in your life, but you can't really have that unless you learn how to process loss. And that's where death becomes interesting because that's a loss that's 100% chance we're going to lose our lives, and
mhm.
100% chance relatives are going to lose their lives. And we talked about this before the program in that I have people that are just really upset because they lost their mother or father. And when I ask them in clinic, well, when did this happen? They'll go like 10 years ago. So there's losses every day in some degree. You lose one day. I've lost one day of my life, living one day of life. I'm closer to death. So we do a funny compartmentalization with loss, but you're not going to really enjoy your life until you learn how to process losses.
Yeah.
And with your own mortality or other people's losses or your losses, they're losses. You don't have to get over them. And so and I'm going to talk about some other ways you can really honor your you can honor your losses, by the way. You don't have to just suffer with them. There's ways of flipping that paradigm around that we'll talk about later this week. But the bottom line is loss is inevitable.
Mhm.
And if you think otherwise, you're resisting, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And if we just want to pause here for a second, we're not telling people not to feel pain. We're just saying as this is when something difficult shows up, that is your reality. And it's very human. It's just human to push things away. I just don't feel like dealing with it. And that's okay. There's only so long you can push that away, because eventually something will piss you off. When I lost my brother, when I was doing James Pennebaker's interview on expressive writing, I discovered James Pennebaker in a psychology class in undergrad. And when I had my loss of my brother, I went 2 weeks back later to school, and I was just looking for someone to piss me off so I could dump my anger on them. And that's another important point. Besides resisting, very often it's hard to heal when there's a strong emotion like anger. And often most people don't pick up on it. And what I mean by that is this, is when anger is there, like I should have done this, or we're angry at ourselves, or we guilt trip ourselves, which is another form of anger.
Right.
When we kind of guilt trip, I should have, could have, would have, one of those things. What happens is it becomes like a wall to grieving in that journey. Sometimes strong emotions like that, and some people feel depression. And I think people in this audience probably have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a psychiatrist that basically said, when we lose someone, we go through stages of grief.
Right.
And we now know it isn't linear, where you go from denial to anger, to bargaining and all that. It's not, we don't do that. We start where we start. And so sometimes anger may be the first thing that shows up. Sometimes it might be depression, but whatever it is, know that something difficult showed up and to work with it. And there are a variety of ways to do that with grief support groups. If you Google your zip code and put in grief support group and your zip code, various churches and other places offer support. David?
It also struck me, I remember my daughter went to a school back east called Hyde, Hyde, which is a character building school. And we're in a group of about 20 parents. And I started telling my story about my background and my childhood and abusiveness. And the headmaster, Joey Gall, was phenomenal. And he called me right out and he goes, "You think you have an ownership on victimhood?" I did. You feel like when you're the victim, you feel like you have an ownership of it. Well, guess what? I'm not the first person who's lost his father. Right?
Yeah, I love what you just said, because suffering is shared by others and not by just you or that person that lost it. Perfect. Yep.
And so I can become a victim of losing my father, which I am, but it depends how I want to relate to it going forward. So again, that's the conversation we're going to have over the next week or so about how you actually relate to this process, because it becomes, and the bottom line of that for me is that you assimilate it, it becomes part of the fabric of your life, is losses and how you, it's like a relationship. I mean, when things are good, they're good, but how a relationship is successful now is how you process the tough times, right?
Yep, exactly. And more importantly, not just process, but how do you relate to those tough times? So let's go back to basic physiology, and then we'll throw in the psychology stuff. When your nervous system has experienced a loss, it's a threat.
Correct.
To your nervous system, which means that everything becomes sensitized, from what you think, from what you process, from what you feel, meaning emotions,
right,
to what you feel sensitized in your body. Your physical pain, the nervous system becomes sensitized. You might notice that. And that's why one of the things I've been bugging David about, and also teasing about, which I do very daily here, which is kind of fun, is to make sure that he mobilizes.
You're not that good at it, by the way.
I'm not that good at it.
I know you think you're winning this battle, but you're not. just to be clear, okay?
Very good. So one of the things that the audience and David are emphasizing here is, when your nervous system is experiencing grief, movement is one of the most important things. I know it sounds ridiculous, but from a straight physiology perspective, when you have loss, and for those of you who have chronic pain, and that's what David and I emphasize here, is that when you have difficulty moving, any form of movement, whether it's a Tai Chi move, it basically sends a message to the nervous system that you're moving up in the hierarchy, which means I'm not frozen, I'm not stuck in a state of survival. The movement helps you kind of shift into a state of safety, because gentle, mindful movement helps, walking helps, breathing helps. So coming back to the psychology now, when you have loss, your physiology becomes very defensive, and sometimes we overinterpret things. Everything's becomes sensitized. We tend to do a lot of mental time trips. That's the psychology of things. We tend to sometimes zip line to the past and then to the present judgment and even future. We tend to do the zip line in the mind. It's called mental time traveling. And then we travel back we reminisce. What's really important for the audience, and David, for you to know, it's okay to do that as long as you know that you're doing that. And if not, what happens is you get drunk in your head and memories and hurts. So it's okay to do mental time traveling into the past and all of that, as long as you know that. And so what you want to do is know where your mind is, much like you know where your children are. So if they were toddlers, you want to know where are you, because spending too much time in the past, in judgment, or in the future will create a lot of anguish, which increases your suffering. So it's okay to mental time trip, reminisce, and then wake up and look around you. There are many things that are alive that we need to be grateful for, and that's where we redirect our attention to.
Well, that brings up a whole nother topic, which we'll talk about later this week. Also, is that there's no timestamp on memories. They're just in there. When the memory gets pulled up, it's like right here, right now. So anyway,
Right.
so I'm gonna do the homework for the day. So take your deep breath. And you get to practice your listening skills. But here, this is a serious thing. I do this in different forms in the clinic with judgment, et cetera. But I want you to think about a major loss that you've had. Maybe you're still
Okay.
on it, and allow yourself to feel it. Just honestly allow yourself to feel this loss. And then I think Dr. Aria's suggestion is excellent, is that take a walk or lay there and do some breathing exercises, whatever you want to do, but don't let the loss, just stick with the loss and feel it and just keep feeling it and feel it this whole week if you need to. And this is another level of what Les talks about, welcoming in the unwelcome, because it's not, you can't transmute that into something positive. A loss
Yep.
is a loss, it's not going to change. So allowing yourself to be with that loss is actually a very powerful tool. And so we're going to be talking about this the next week or two. Also, we're going to go into attachment, which is a huge deal as far as suffering. So anyway, this is Dynamic Healing Moments with Dr. Aria and Dr. Hanscom. And we enjoyed talking to you. So have a great week, and we'll talk soon. See you tomorrow.
Have a great morning, everyone.